Hello, everyone, and welcome to the May 26th edition of the Decaturish Twitch Show. I'm your host, editor, and publisher, Dan Wisenhunt. We are starting a little early today. Our special guest today is City Schools of Decatur Superintendent Dr. Maggie Fehrman. Dr. Fehrman, how are you today?
I am fabulous.
Thank you so much for joining us. Our other panelists today are Decatur High student Genesis Reddix. Genesis, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. And Decatur's contributor, Hans Utz. Hans, how are you, sir?
Doing well. Always a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. So the way this works is we're going to have some questions for Dr. Fehrman. If you would like to ask a question for Dr. Fehrman, you can create a Twitch account, give us a follow, and jump into our chats. And if you ask them and we have time, she'll be able to answer them. So I would like to just start, Dr. Fehrman, and get right into it. You know, this is I think, an undeniably rocky time for city schools of Decatur. Lots going on. I know there's a lot of stuff that you personally can't discuss because it's in litigation. But I wanted to ask generally, why are you the right person to guide CSD through this moment?
Yeah, and I would actually challenge that it's a rocky time. I think that even though there has been a lot of stuff in the media and the news and various events, I think City Schools of Decatur has never lost the eye on is most important for our school system, and that's the students. And every decision that is made in City Schools of Decatur is focused on doing what's best for our students. And I think I am the best person to take us through this because I've got 3 years of experience here in the school system. I've been a principal, I've worked in schools, I've had 20 years in my resume of really good quality school experience. And I know the system, I know the community, I know the students, the principals. I've supervised the principals for 3 years, so I'm very aware of their strengths and what amazing talents they have as as school leaders. So I think that with all that as my background, I am more than ready to help make sure that we will navigate through closing out the school year, 2 more days, and then post planning next week, and then continue on with plans for next year. We are already, I would say 99.99% already finished planning for next year. So we can go into June focusing on what other implementation steps we need to take so that in July, when we come back after break, we are 100% ready to lift training, to share and communicate with parents, so that everyone's ready to walk in those doors in August for a successful school year.
Genesis, you had some questions for Dr. Fehrman today. What's on your mind?
Thank you. I wanted to highlight the point where you said that everything we do is on behalf of students. And so I wanted to ask you about the student voice. So oftentimes the student voice is taken as a matter of a suggestion or consideration. And oftentimes this has led to students feeling unheard in decision making. Do you have steps in place to make sure that the student voice is involved in most decision making that concerns us at least, or placing a position where student representation is a vital position in the matter?
Genesis, thank you. Great question. And first, want to just congratulate Genesis, who's graduating from City Schools of Decatur. What's tomorrow already? Is going to Temple University. So she's been a student that's been on my radar. Her name comes up in lots of different things that I've worked with in the high school because she's just been such an amazing scholar and achieved so much in the high school. So Genesis, congratulations, job well done. And I do believe very strongly in student voice. That is very important to me. Having been a principal, met very often with my students, had a student advisory team even a middle school principal. They were instrumental in helping us launch PBIS successfully at my middle school. And then even here in City Schools of Decatur, I feel very strongly that students need to have a voice. We have a very well educated group of students. We have very well students that are very attuned to what is happening in their community, and we need to capitalize on that. And a couple things in the past that I've done is when we were getting ready to really do a big retool of our code of conduct a couple years ago before COVID, Dr. Huddleston and I did some visits at the high school and at the middle school and talked directly with students about their experience with the code of conduct, what they thought was great in it, or if they thought it was great, what they didn't think were things that should be in there. And that helped inform what we were putting in our code of conduct. And then this year, we're doing another code of conduct review, and it's just an annual process that I believe strongly in. And that we have several students participating in that process of looking at the code, talking about the student perspective. To me, that's very essential and important. And then the steps for next year is Ms. Burnett and I have already started working on a plan to have a student advisory committee meet with me once a month. Students from the high school, and several students from the middle school will hopefully be part of this team. And it'll be a monthly meeting, and it either could be here at the central office or it could be at the schools. But I very much am eager to involve students and hear their voices so they can help inform decisions. And looking at stakeholder engagement in general, I think people have seen already that I take a great deal of time gathering stakeholder input before I make a decision. And I believe that my role is really to facilitate a decision being made and to hear from the different voices around the table so that we can make a well-informed decision.
So before we jump to Hans, we already have a question. Newt asks, surely, Dr. Fehrman, you can appreciate that not all of the stakeholders feel that student learning was at the forefront this year, and that is phrased as a question.
Well, I would disagree. I think that as someone who's worked here all year, all decisions that we were making was putting student learning. Now, we did have to balance where students were to do that learning, but student learning was always at the core of the decision, whether they were learning online at home or whether we were bringing them into our buildings to learn. I disagree with that. I think we were always putting student learning at the forefront of every decision made. Now, was it the decision everybody wanted? Maybe not. But doing what's best for kids was at the center of the decisions that were made.
Hans, what questions do you have?
So I kind of wanted to second a little bit of what I was hearing Dr. Fehrman say right there. I mean, this is really the first year. This past year is really fundamentally the first year where there had to be some balance struck between student learning and student safety in an environment where we really didn't know what that meant. And so, I mean, yes, compromises had to be made, and not everybody was happy with the compromises that were made, but it was a bit of an unprecedented year to be able to say student learning wasn't at the center. I mean, I think that was a tiny bit unfair. Yeah. My question is around, several questions. First, you had mentioned how, every decision that CSD has made has always been made from the point of focusing on what outcomes are best for students first. And I appreciate the sentiment, but I think it is also the case that the reason why you're now the superintendent and the other superintendent isn't here is because there were some legitimate and concerning questions raised about things that were done and decisions that were made, and just fundamentally the tone that was taken at a leadership level. And so I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about how, and you already did a little bit talking about, gathering stakeholders and soliciting opinions, but I would like to hear you talk a little bit about how you're intent on maybe shifting the tone and building a little bit more of a collaborative environment might be something CSD could sorely use right now.
Yeah, no, and I'm a huge believer in collaboration and gathering that stakeholder involvement and engagement. So a couple different ways to do that is plugging in with our SLTs at the local school level. So each school has an individual leadership team, and they are elected parents and staff members. So I plan on really engaging with those school leadership teams to help make decisions, to gather input from their local schools and their communities. And then one of those members also serves at our system level leadership team. So they bring that voice to me as I meet with those. And previously we've met 3 or 4 times a year, but I've shared with them already that the plan going forward, because of my commitment to stakeholder input and just helping me make decisions, we'll move to a monthly meeting as well, so that I'm getting that constant rotation of information and feedback. The other great thing that I think we already have in place that's helping get stakeholder involvement just on the teacher level is our teacher advisory council. So I meet with our teacher advisory council once a month, We have representatives from every school that sit on the teacher advisory council. And we definitely know that that is a team that we want to be representative of our staff. And we have new seats coming up this year to serve I think 3 new seats. I've shared with the principals to make sure that as they're selecting a staff member to serve on that team, that it is a staff member that can speak and be representative of the overall staff for City Schools of Decatur. So that team, we've identified several topics that we want to take on next year. So staff morale is one that comes up consistently as being an issue. And I've talked with them, okay, what can we do? What are ideas that you have? Go to your staff, talk with your teachers, and what are ideas that they can bring so that we can really tackle this issue. So there's several other issues there that I'm looking at. What do our stakeholders actually want to do, and what is the things that they think need to be addressed? And that's one way to foster stakeholder engagement, is to ask the questions and then help facilitate the work to get it done. So that's the.
Is it possible? If I could just interrupt right there, I want to be sensitive around things that get raised in these sorts of committees. But one of the ways that I think it's broadly recognized that there probably is a morale issue at CSD. And for a school system that is as well funded and is as beloved by parents as CSD, it's hard, I think, for us to hear that the teachers are disappointed or there's a morale issue. That's the right way to say it.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways to prevent teachers' voices being heard is by allowing them to speak in these meetings, but not ever making any of the recommendations or the wish list of those teachers public, so that there isn't anything that the administration is held accountable to vis-a-vis teacher requests. Mm-hmm. And so I would like to ask, is there an intent to allow that teacher's voice to be known in the community so that the administration feels some pressure to actually respond to the teacher requests?
I don't have a problem with it. I think that's something I would let TAC, the teachers on that committee, make that decision. So I think we don't have bylaws for how that group operates, but I think that might be a good idea. So yeah, definitely something I'm willing to ask that group.
Okay. What Hans is touching on is a question that I had, and this was a prevailing theme for the last 6 years. People would come to me as a reporter and say, I see a problem. I have an issue. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd say, okay, well, do you want to talk about it? They're like, no, I can't. I'm like, why not? Because they feared retribution. They feared that if they raised their concerns, rather than being listened to, they were going to be retaliated against. And I heard it from numerous people. Now, obviously, you're not David Duty. You're a different person. But you did work under him, and you were hired by him. What are you going to do to assure teachers that or staff that if they voice a concern publicly, they're not going to suffer any professional consequences as a result of voicing, whether it's to me, whether it's at a school board meeting, whether it's in a letter to parents? What are you going to do to make them feel comfortable voicing those concerns in a public forum?
Yeah, that's a great question too. And I'll try to be a role model for that. So I believe strongly in a coaching mindset as we support our teachers and staff and even students. Everyone makes mistakes. No one's perfect. Case in point, there was an article you wrote couple weeks ago, Dan, and quoted me. And that quote hit people in a certain way. And I owned up to it. I apologized for it. And I developed kind of my own professional learning plan to make sure that I'm working on the areas that I need to address as a white woman. So taking the ownership of a mistake, but then also putting an action plan and keeping a mindset of, hey, no one's perfect. We all make mistakes. We can all grow from things that we've done in our past to make sure we improve going forward. So I think modeling that coaching mindset, showing people that I'm not perfect either. I also make mistakes and I'm willing to own up to the mistakes that I've made, and then can learn and grow from those. And then people that get to know me will say that, look, yes, when I make a mistake, I feel okay telling Maggie, hey, look, I messed up, I did this. And using that coaching mindset going forward about hey, look, no one's perfect. I'm the first one to say I'm not perfect. And let's talk about what we can do going forward to support staff members in those issues or concerns that they have or mistakes that they've made. And I'm also very open to feedback and hearing from the teachers and staff if they disagree with something. That's why I try to do a lot of stakeholder input on the front end so that we're not trying to chase our tail on the back end. I want to know, first of all, do we need a ship or do we need a plane? And then I'm sure as heck not going to build a ship when I know we actually need a plane, so that it's not coming out later, hey, we did this, this, and this, but that's not what we should have done at all. So getting that input on the front end, I think will help teachers feel heard, feel understood, and just even giving some examples of that with the mitigation strategies for next year. They were instrumental in writing those and really giving the guidance on what the final decisions for those were.
Question. What if what the teachers would like to see is not consistent with the other stakeholders' perspective? How would
Mm-hmm.
that be resolved?
And that happens a lot. It does. Sometimes priorities are varying. But where my job comes in is helping all the stakeholders see that, look, it's not outvoting one group, outvoting another. It's about making a decision, an informed decision with one goal in mind, which is doing what's best for our students. And that's where having tools like a coherence net framework that we use to guide our school improvement plans, that's what having a district and school improvement plans really help mitigate trying to pit one group against another. It's about working and collaborating together to solve the problem and or get to a goal. And the goal is student success.
Genesis, what other questions do you have for Dr. Fehrman today?
Well, I have one question on behalf of the student body again.
Yeah.
One thing that the Student Coalition for Equity, which is an organization I'm a part of, that's fully run by CSD students, is that holds in high regard is holding CSD faculty and administration accountable for potential harmful behavior uh, that causes a lot of hurt towards specifically marginalized communities. Have you thought about how you will protect marginalized people within our student body and also the community members that are related to the student body?
Great question, Genesis. And I think we've already done setting the foundation through our equity action plan, through implementing PBIS, and then also setting the stage with restorative practices. And taking those things to the next level will really help bring that student voice to a position where we can say, here, staff member, this is what you said, this is what you did, and have those open conversations to address those concerns. So that is one of the things I think, just taking those things that we already have in place up to the next level will help create and help ensure that teachers, if they cause harm to a student or if they further show actions that are not helping our marginalized students, that they are seeing that action and are ready to take the next steps to try to fix it.
Dr. Fehrman, are you familiar? There was an Instagram account. It was Black in CSD, or it was an Instagram account. I might be getting the name wrong, but basically it was students of color who were relaying some of the experiences that they've had as they've attended Decatur High and other schools. Are you familiar with that? And what is kind of your reaction to that?
Yeah, so I heard that there was some Instagram account. I never saw any of the posts directly. But when I talk with Lily, Dr. Huddleston and Mary Banks, we talk about how do we make sure that students know that there's a person they can reach out to at the school. So instead of feeling like they have to go to a place that there aren't any resources to help that student, we want them to know and help them identify. We've got the student center. We have counselors. We have staff that work on our equity teams that are available to help students if they feel they're being discriminated against. So really, we want to make sure that we are communicating enough about what are the available resources we have for our students that are feeling that way.
Hans.
Well, budget is always going to be a set of questions that I was going to ask. I know we discussed it in a couple of occasions, but I've seen the new budget that has come out, and so I do appreciate some of the changes that were made. Just so the public that's listening knows, adjusting costs in a budget and trying to control costs a budget is like a super tanker. You can't just yank that wheel, otherwise you end up blocking the Suez Canal. It does take a little bit of time to actually fix it in a responsible manner. But I wanted to talk about, you've already started to bring down some of the operating costs. Talk to us and the community and the taxpayers about some of the steps that you're going to be doing over the next year and really, frankly, the next 5-year plan to help bring back into line some of those operating costs with something that you would expect to see of a system our size?
Yeah, so to me, it's about effectiveness and efficiency. So are the employees that we have doing the work, do they have the tools they need to do their job effectively and efficiently? And then looking at structures in our organization to make sure that we are aligned so that that we don't have two people doing the same job if one person can do that job. And it's not about eliminating positions necessarily, but it's about getting the best bang for our buck out of the people that we have on staff. And also elevating staff that are already doing a lot of the work to help them feel compensated fairly and appropriately for the amount of work that they're doing. So I think really taking some time for me to look through the organizational structure, particularly at the Wilson Center. Do we have a good alignment and organizational structure that's helping us get the job done? Or have we created systems that are artificially getting in the way for taking more time to get the work done that really needs to be streamlined a little bit? So those are some of the initial pieces. But then also just talking with the staff and making sure that we have a clear understanding as a school district going forward about the work, the core business that we are doing, and that they have the resources they need so that they can get their job done more quickly, more effectively, and efficiently. So that's something you'll hear me talk about a lot, is effectiveness and efficiency, and talking with people about, hey, let's see, how can you do this more effectively, more efficiently, because that's going to get us more bang for our buck at the end of the year.
Dr. Fehrman, related to that,
what do you look at? I was going to say, what kind of metrics, and I'm not talking about individual performance metrics in this case, I'm talking about really sort of system-wide budgetary or fiscal metrics. What would you say are some of the most important ones that you track or that you intend to track if the systems aren't set up to be able to keep an eye on it to make sure it doesn't get out of whack?
And that's something I'm working on right now. So each department leader is working on their goals for next year and what their key performance indicators are going to be. And when I meet with them for their final evaluation in just the next couple of weeks, they're going to be presenting their plan to me so that I have a good understanding of what metrics they're using to measure effectiveness and efficiency so that we can set benchmarks for next year and make sure that we're meeting those goals. So that's to be determined, but it's already in the works. Each department is really working on developing those plans with their team.
Dr. Fehrman, one of the, and I know you can't talk about the specifics of the various pieces of litigation for obvious reasons, but can you tell us what effect that is having on CSD's budget, how much the district is spending on those legal fees, and has the district considered bringing in an in-house attorney, somebody who's actually on the district's payroll, to try to reduce those costs?
So I don't have that number off the top of my head, and that would be a number I would have to gather and look at over time, because some of these things have been, started at what month, and then lots of things kind of happen month to month. So that's not a number I have right off the top of my head. But I think, yes, it previously had been discussed. Do we bring in an attorney? Do we onboard a person? I honestly think that in a typical year outside of, and now this is totally me anticipating with me being in place, that we will have a nice, effective and efficient and well-run school district so that we can move forward and not need so much legal anything. And then it shouldn't be that kind of a cost that we would have to weigh. Is it better or worse to hire someone? It should pretty much at the end flesh itself out and be pretty clear that we don't need to hire a full-time attorney on our payroll.
Genesis, what other questions do you have for Dr. Fehrman today?
Thank you. I wanted a chance to kind of go back to your answer about addressing issues where students are discriminated against. And you talked about making sure that students will have support available to them, whether that's from the student center or in the faculty or administration. Are there any systems in place, or will there be systems in place in order to increase the number of faculty members or student center staff who will be of color or of the queer community and more?
Yeah, another good question, Genesis. So we have in place an equitable hiring tool, and it's a guide to help administrators that are hiring make sure they're looking at the position and looking at it from a lot of different angles. but also getting multiple perspectives on what is the best candidate for the position. And then it's not just about making sure we hire people with an equity focused mind, but then also looking at how are we supporting our staff of color so that they want to stay invested in City Schools of Decatur. So that's another piece for me that's a priority is in not just, not just investing in our staff of color, but investing in all of our staff. But we particularly want to make sure we retain the staff that we have on hand.
Can I ask just another question as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. I'm wondering, do you have the presence of POC, queer staff and more with marginalized backgrounds within your own circle, maybe as an advisory team or just working with you?
Yeah, so cabinet is really my circle, my advisory team. And there are several leaders of color on that team. And I would think, I'm trying to go through the list right now, but there are several Black and Hispanic staff members. We definitely have those staff members on team, and I use them as advisors frequently. Dr. Huddleston in particular, I consult with her probably daily, multiple times, to get her perspective and her guidance on what she thinks, an issue is, and help me get that multiple perspective. So I rely. To me, when you make a decision with a group of people that is diverse, you're going to make a better decision. So I always really try to bring a diverse group of people together to make a decision.
And how would you say your relation is? Sorry, Dan. How would you say your relationship is with some of the groups that support CSD or track very closely with CSD? So, for example, the Beacon Hill Black Alliance or the Black Parents Association, or some of the groups, parent groups of color that are obviously deeply invested in CSD. I know that there has been some. Historically, there's been a little bit of alienation there with the former superintendent. How do you plan to address some of that and rebuild some of those bonds of trust that are necessary in the community?
And it's an important role to play as a superintendent, is to make sure that those community groups feel heard, feel involved in decision making. Had a great call last week with Carmen from the Black Parent Alliance. Her and I are going to have monthly check-ins just to keep up with what's going on and what her group is concerned about. Reached out to Don Bolton, who is the facilitator of the education arm for Beacon Hill. Her and I have a meeting coming up on the calendar as well. And I always want to invite people to the table to be proactive, to get their input before decisions are made, before the final bill is written, to make sure that we've heard them up front. And I think building that involvement and engagement ahead of time helps them see, yes, we want you involved, we want you engaged at the table as much as we want any other group engaged, so that we can make sure that those groups have a voice and their voice is lifted.
Question. From Julian. What policies and reforms are being implemented to ensure that district leadership at the administrative level specifically is diverse and representative of our community?
So we do have a policy. I don't know the policy number, but we do have a policy. It is about making sure we have a diverse staff and that our staff is reflective of the population. And that's one of the reasons we use the equitable hiring tool, is we want to make sure as we look at hiring staff, are they bringing that perspective? I don't want to sit around the table and look at a whole table full of white women helping me make a decision. That's not going to be an informed decision that's going to be best for all the stakeholders that we have in our school system. So I really am very committed to making sure that my current diverse cabinet stays as diverse as they are, so that we can get those multiple perspectives. So there is a policy. I don't know the number of it, but it's something I'm very committed to.
Dr. Fehrman, let's fast forward a little bit and talk to us about what is the next school year going to look like when students return in August. Is it going to be what we had, this year? Or what's it going to look like?
So that's kind of a crystal ball question. I can tell you what I hope it looks like, and then we'll see what the CDC says and any changes that come forward. But I hope it's a much more normal experience and more of a return to normalcy for our students. So at this time, our plan is 5 full days of instruction for all of our students. All of our students from 0, we start students at ECLC when they are 6 months old, all the way up to our students in 12th grade. So making sure we have that full 5 days of instruction for those students, and that schedule being more of a normal schedule back to what we used to have pre-COVID. So that is 100% a full commitment that we have as a district. Some of the mitigation strategies, we're still, we published at I think it was the June, May board meeting, hey, here's what we're looking at for our mitigation strategies. And at that time, we were still saying mandated masks for all students in the school system and for all staff members. Social distancing to the greatest extent that we can, trying to cohort students as it makes sense in the lower elementary grade levels. And the students eating lunch right now, the current policy is that students will eat lunch. Hopefully we can do as much outdoor space as possible for our students, because we know that when you take off your mask, that's the highest risk of transmission of COVID. So making sure that when masks are off, that it is outside to decrease that risk. But we are really looking forward to and planning for much of a return to normalcy for our students next year as possible. And then we're just going to have to see over the summer if any changes to our mitigation strategies are needed based on what comes out from the CDC.
So following up, we do have a couple of questions on the diversity in hiring question. I just want to point out that Dr. Fehrman has answered that extensively, but we can address it again. I want to go in a different direction though with this question from a reader. Reader asks, in the new school year, how can you make sure that in going back to school, throughout every single school, there's a better sense of safety for marginalized students?
So I would say our PBIS program is instrumental in helping students understand what their expectations are. And when we have an agreement at a school level of here's what our students' expectations are, here's what our staff expectations are, and everyone's on the same page with what those expectations are, that's going to ensure a safer environment for our students. Now, if they're talking about COVID protocols, that's why we have the mitigation strategies in place. What I really love about the PBIS system being a district-wide initiative is it is something that we can look at and monitor on an ongoing basis. So it uses a data tracking tool called SWIS, and that's data that I'll be looking at on a monthly level at a district level, disaggregating it by race, disaggregating it by student, or not by student, but teacher and by school, so that I can really keep my finger on the pulse of, are there areas where students of particular groups are not being treated equitably or just represented more in a certain behavior than other students. And those are some tough conversations that I'll have to have going forward with administration next year to see why is that happening? What additional training or coaching do teachers need to make sure that we are approaching our students in an equitable way?
Hans, sorry to cut you off earlier.
No, that was a very important question. I had a question that was a little bit, I think, both for Genesis and Dr. Fehrman. Like the thing that breaks my heart a little bit this year is how abnormal this last year was for the seniors in the system. And so I would love to hear from both of you on what, kind of steps did the system take and what was done to try to, still give you as normal, like graduation from high school is a really big deal, right? So what, what did the schools do to the best of their ability to try to still make it a special year for the seniors and the kids coming out of the system right now?
Well, let's let Genesis start that.
Well, I would say that I'm fully understanding of the very complicated position that the leadership at our school had. And I think a lot of students can say the same. We were at home learning virtually like the rest of the system for a pretty long part of our school year. So it was kind of difficult, especially in terms of grading and getting an assignment and really adapting to a new environment. But I think later on, when a lot of us switched into concurrent, where we were coming into school or we chose to stay virtual, personally for me, I knew that coming into school was a lot better for me as a learner. And then finally, as for the seniors, there were a lot of events in May that took place. And I could tell that the administration and the PTSA all were very big. Oh, and also the SGA as well were very big on making us have some experiences before we graduate. So I definitely tried to participate in all of them. And I'm just happy that the year was able to conclude the way it did, considering the circumstances.
Dr. Fehrman?
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think the staff and the student government organization at the high school did a great job of really lifting up some fun events for the seniors, the field day. Then there was the rock and roll review that was last weekend. So there was a movie night. So I think there was a lot happening. And then even our other schools this week, I've been running around try to get to all of our schools. I was at Renfro today for their parade for eighth graders, cheering on our eighth grade students. I was also at Oakhurst cheering on their second graders, and then was at Glenwood for one of their moving up ceremonies. Last week I was at Tally. Fave had their fifth grade finale. And I think every school just really tried to do something special so that kids felt like that sense of, okay, we're getting back to a normal, we're teeing up for next year and ready to jump into the 21-22 school year, ready to learn.
So we have another question. Are there LGBTQ voices being promoted and listened to among your administration and decision-making circle?
100%, yeah.
Okay. Well, that was easy. Hans?
This is a tough question to answer, and I'm not actually sure how the school system answers it. But one of the things that has really kind of been a background concern of mine through this past year is whether the K to 12 school systems have been able to appropriately influence college admissions around resetting expectations for what the kids are going to have coming out of this experience, right? Because this was a year where I think certainly for a part of the year, safety took some precedence over curriculum. And I just, having worked with many universities, I know they're not the swiftest moving of entities on the planet. So could you talk a little bit about how K-12 education in general helped try to drive that so that it's fair for these kids going into college?
Hans, I have to be honest, that's really a question. I don't have much information to share about it this time. I don't, that would be a much better question kind of for, I think, our high school guidance team on the work that they've done directly with some of the schools and as kids have been applying. So yeah, I don't really I'm happy to follow up with them and get that information, but that's really one I don't have a lot of knowledge about at this point.
Got a follow-up.
Sure.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, real quick, Hans.
No, go ahead. I'm done.
Somebody said, "I'm sorry that answer about LGBTQ representation had absolutely no backed-up evidence. Please go into detail."
Yeah, well, here's what I'm going to say about that is I'm not going to identify which staff members that serve on my teams or on our principalships are comfortable or not comfortable, stating what their sexual preference is. But I can tell you that I have multiple principals and people on my cabinet that have varying sexual preferences, and that's, I think, enough said.
Another question. How is LGBTQ culture and history being included in the curriculum?
That's a good question. I know we're looking at all of our curriculum standards. In particular, social studies curriculum is kind of up this year for reviewing and revision. So that's a good, we try to always use our equity lens when we look at things. We definitely use our culturally responsive tools that we have in place as well. So that's something definitely to make sure we are focusing on and including that as we go forward.
Genesis, we've got about 6 minutes left with Dr. Fehrman. I wanted to make sure you got a chance to get most of your questions in. Do you have another question for Dr. Fehrman?
I do. I actually have a question from another student, Cleo Lagon, being the former president of the Black Student Union at Decatur High. She asked, a lot of people like myself have lost trust and believe you have racial biases against the Black community. How do you plan to change our minds?
Yeah, great question. And I worked on a plan that I put on our website. And it's a multi-stepped plan. So really listening first and continuing my education. So really understanding from the student voice and from the staff voice and other groups about what is their perspective, what is their lived experience, listening in, leaning into that, and then reflecting on that. So as I read and listen, how does that sit with me? What are the things that come up for me as I go through that listening and educational process? And then I've got to remember as I go through that process is that there may have been a time where I unintentionally or intentionally caused harm. And that I have to keep that at the forefront so that I continue to lean in and do the equity work that I am fully committed to doing. And then taking some risks. So, how do I, as the overall leader for the school district, step up and interrupt racism and biases when I see it, and making, committing to myself that I'm going to do that. There's a big one. And then, looking at what policies need updated as a school district so that people who do feel marginalized or discriminated against have a voice and that those situations can be resolved. And then also understanding that as a white woman, I may not earn the trust or feel trusted 100% by groups, my staff or students of color, just based on historical events that have happened. But that doesn't stop me from doing the work that I'm committed to. And leaning in and forgiving myself if I make a mistake, but also hoping that those who I work with and those students that are in our school system and parents will give me the opportunity to move forward in a positive direction. And then building those relationships. So meeting with Beacon Hill Black Alliance, setting meetings, regular meetings with our Black Parent Alliance, engaging with the Student Government Association. So building those relationships. So I can do all the work, I can try to do it, but I understand that there are people with their own perspectives, and I can do what I can to try to earn trust. But at the end of the day, if that trust isn't there, then I've tried as hard as I can. I can just keep trying, but I can't change someone else's mind. If they've determined to make it up, I can hope that they will, and do the best that I can.
A related question. Are there any clear structures in place to ensure that teachers and administration who have harmed the student body will be held accountable and removed from further opportunities to inflict harm on students? And if I can make a supposition, I think this person is talking about racism
Mm-hmm.
specifically. So do you have a response to that?
Yeah. So, and what I encourage people to do if they've been harmed or they've experienced discrimination, to make sure we know about it at the central office. And then once we know about it, we can take action to help correct that grievance or that discrimination. So until we actually know, here's what's happening, here's what's going on, we can't do anything about it other than keeping to try to enforce our policies and procedures, do evaluations like we do on an ongoing basis, and classroom observations, and giving people feedback as we see errors in their performance. But really, we need people to feel comfortable and to feel trusted that when they do step up and share those stories or those instances of, hey, this happened to me, this wasn't equitable, this wasn't fair, to know that they have been heard so that we can take the actions and do what we can to try to correct that.
Genesis, we have about 2 minutes left. Do you have any other questions on your list that you'd like to get to?
Yes, please. So,
Sure.
in terms of making sure that students of color or faculty of color feel heard when an event of discrimination occurs, do you plan on involving yourself in concrete changes, as in policy and social changes throughout the system that will discourage harmful behavior that targets specific marginalized communities?
Yeah, and that's where we really pull in our resources from our equity department to help us review policies and procedures. And that's part of our equity action plan, is to have an ongoing review of policies and procedures using our equity evaluation tool. So that as these policies come up in that schedule, that we review them, that we revise them and make sure that they are equitable going forward.
Well, Dr. Fehrman, we thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. It is 6:15. We want to be respectful of your time. Before we let you go, is there anything you want to say at the conclusion of our show? And I've got a couple of comments afterward. I know you have to go, but I wanted to give you a chance to make a couple of concluding remarks.
Well, Dan, I really thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity. Sorry, I had to change the schedule a little bit on the last minute, but I appreciate you for being flexible, especially Genesis and Hans for adjusting your schedules as well to accommodate me. That was so nice of you. So I really appreciate that. I just want to share with the community that I love this job. It's an amazing position that I'm in. I'm honored to be here, and just looking forward to the successes that we're going to have as a school district going forward. I think it's going to be a great year next year. Really looking forward to getting to know more of our community members and students going forward. So just want to thank everyone for all their hard work. My job is really just to make sure that people have the resources they need and they have as few barriers in their way to get their job done. And if I've done that, I think I've helped make the City Schools of Decatur a better run school system.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fehrman. And if we could brag on Genesis just a little bit. She is graduating tomorrow, so congratulations to her. And she is going to be attending Temple. She's going to be majoring in journalism. I've tried very hard to talk her out of that. She apparently wants to sign up for it, so God bless her. We need more journalists, certainly. So best of luck to you, Genesis, and congratulations. And thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for being a great representative of Decatur High School and sharing your perspectives with us.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Congrats, Genesis. It's great.
Yes, congrats. So this is the Decaturish.com Twitch show. I am your host, editor, and publisher, Dan Wisenhunt. We typically do our show. Dr. Fehrman, if you have to jump off, you're good to go. Thank you. We typically broadcast every Wednesday at 6 o'clock. Because it is the summer and because I will be doing a lot with my son this summer, traveling a little bit, because we're vaccinated, we can do that. I'm going to put the show on a hiatus for about 8 weeks. We are coming back because we have municipal elections coming up, and this is going to be the place that you will want to go to hear all of the candidates, as many as we can get anyway, running for school board, city commission, city council. All the local races that we can try to cover. We will be doing forums on this format. We really like this format. It allows people to ask questions. It eliminates sort of the theatrics of a forum, where you have people yelling and holding signs, and it gives people a chance to actually listen to the answers. This is not a Dr. Fehrman decision. This is a board decision, and I will just say that I have a profound disagreement with the Decatur School Board, and I know you're watching, so this is why I'm saying this, with your decision to not require your independent investigator, McGuire Woods, to release the results of their investigation into the previous superintendent. This is the time for more transparency and not less. And if you are truly interested in restoring the public's trust in the school district, then you need to hold the superintendent accountable in the same way that you hold every other employee in this district accountable. And when you don't do that, that sends a message. That sends a message that the rules apply to everyone else and they don't apply to you. So this is the job you signed up for. You signed up to be leaders. And being a leader, sometimes making tough decisions that aren't going to benefit you politically. But respectfully, if you didn't want to do that job, then you shouldn't have run. And if you still don't want to do that job, then respectfully make way for people who do want to do that job of being accountable to their constituents and accountable to the public and holding every employee at the school district accountable, including the superintendent. So that's all I have to say about that. I hope everyone has a great summer. Wear a mask if they ask you to wear a mask. Please get your vaccine if you haven't gotten it. Please, please, please get your vaccine. We are so close to the end of this thing. If you are traveling, please travel safely. We will announce our next Twitch show in the coming weeks, and we'll let you know who is going to be on. So Bye-bye, everybody. Have a good weekend and have a good summer.